So, Juck over.
We cannot allow everything to be stripped away from us because they change the formats around us, the traditions, the stadiums, the uniforms, the rivalries. We allow them to devalue it. We lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. And welcome to Juck on Bucks, the weekend show live. Hope you guys are all having a fantastic Saturday. I felt like popping in and interacting with some of you guys. We've had some fun talking back and forth through the comment section this past week, but going to bring some of your comments up today, and we'll get into that. But first, I got to do some segments. Got some segments to do. We got a lot of stuff we got to cover in the next couple of shows. We got the internal investigation report has come out from the Brawl. I want to hit on that. We got another Portal Confidential, which I love these Portal Confidentials. Some opinions on the Ohio State portal class from an unnamed source. A Bucknuts report from another unnamed source about Oregon's handling of the portal as it pertains to Ohio State. What teams in the Big Ten are trending up as Ohio State attempts to compete in a Big Ten that looks so vastly different than it did 5 years ago? I think it's a really interesting discussion with revenue sharing coming up here and the expanded playoff. But we got a couple of interesting new rule changes on the horizon, and it's more than just trying to stop guys from faking injuries. Matt Rule telling Urban Meyer exactly what I told you the other day. Big news out of North Carolina. Oregon wide receiver Tez Johnson talking crazy. Buckeyes at the Combine. Let's start with Tez Johnson, who I think is just electric. I don't think there's many people on the planet that have feet like this guy. And he and his teammate Evan Stewart made some fantastic plays against Ohio State in the 32-31 win for Oregon in the regular season. And he goes to the Combine and does his interview. We've talked about a lot of these interviews this week, but here's what he had to say at his Combine interview about the two games against Ohio State.
The first Ohio State game, I felt like they came out there and they wanted to see who can win skill for skill, just let us play. Second game, they kind of played it like, all right, we're going to drop back. We can't hang with these guys, skill for skill. So we're going to try to keep everything in front of us. So that's what they did, and and for them it worked. So we went out there to that game and think we definitely had a really good game plan against those guys, but they executed well. So kudos to them, tip my hats to them, because they won the national championship. If you beat us that year, you definitely better go win the national championship, because that game, I think, for sure was the national championship for us. So.
That's some serious ego right there. Skill for skill, Ohio State couldn't compete with them. I find that so irritating, man. Like, I just like humble people. I like humble people. Like, it was nice that he patted him on the back and said, good job. But he also says, like, you know, if you beat us, then you better win the national championship, as though they were the best team. They weren't. In fact, they got dominated harder than any other team throughout that entire playoffs. It was them. They were so thoroughly dominated by Ohio State, worse than Ohio State beat anybody else in those playoffs. And I just think that's some petty stuff right there. Don't like it at all. And I really liked him as a player. Too bad. I won't anymore. I'm sure I won't forget that. But let's get to this Buckeye boarding house article. So the boarding house over on Bucknuts, and Bucknuts, one of the few publications that does something like this. The boarding house has a disclaimer that essentially says, this is just gossip. We're not putting our name on it. And they do it behind the paywall so that they can put out gossip without being held to journalistic integrity standards. And again, this is a site owned by CBS 24/7. So if you're a paying customer and you want to hear this kind of stuff, they'll put it out there for you. Things they're hearing but won't put their name on it. They sign it Bucknuts staff. And the problem is that news gets spread around from that boarding house, and it's not spread around that there is this disclaimer. So people report, hey, on Bucknuts, I saw this. And this is the exact thing that happened when Aaron Nolan's dad came on here, when it was said that Aaron Nolan, by Bucknuts, had split city and had gone back down to Georgia. He was leaving. Well, that wasn't true, but that came from the boarding house, which was just, you know, a gossip line. And it got spread around as though Bucknuts was reporting that, when in fact, they're not really reporting it. They're saying right there it's gossip, but it's very confusing. Anyway, their new report here that everybody's talking about, they're saying that Oregon contacted 5 or 6 current Buckeyes to try to get them into the portal. Oregon is ruthless upfront about tampering. They are so desperate, it looks like they're just going down big time teams list and picking out names to go after. They offer way above market price, and they offered Ohio State players double the expected value. The blowout loss on the road was humiliating. They are so desperate to be considered a big boy of college football. So that's from an unnamed source, and that's what they had reported. A lot to get to there. I guess the first thing I'll say, like, desperate to be considered one of the big boys of college football. I mean, they won the Big Ten in their first year. They were undefeated. They are now consistently recruiting in the top 5, going head up against Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, and winning. They kind of own the transfer portal. They've got great fans. They've got all the financial support you could ever ask for. They were number 1 for a long period that time, or last year. They got a great young coach. Like, if they're not one of the big boys of the sport right now in this current snapshot of an era, you know, I don't know who is. Ohio State and Georgia, like, but it's just those two. If you go out from there, I think you have to include Texas and Oregon. So I'll give them their respect there. But we know these guys are a problem to deal with. We know that they are definitely going after Ohio State players and trying to coax them to Oregon, because getting one up on Ohio State, particularly after stealing Carlos Loughlin, I'm sure that's something that eats at Dan Lanning's craw a little bit. You know, they would love to do that. But one of the things I've always said about Ryan Day, and something that is more important now than ever, Ryan Day recruits good people, and that brotherhood that they have created at Ohio State is 100% real. And you have got to have that to keep your team together this day and age, when you've got people offering more money everywhere you look. To be able to keep these guys intact and counting on this brotherhood and these coaches here are going to get me to the NFL where I'm going to get the real money. It's just unbelievable. Obviously, the data for the NFL speaks for itself, but you also got to be really comfortable. You also got to have a great family atmosphere to keep those guys there. The job they've done at Ohio State with this has been better than anybody else. It's just outstanding. I think it's something to really be proud of, and it's something that Ryan Day has done better than anybody in the country when we're talking about big time programs. Now, Denzel Burke, we talked about him the other day, but Denzel Burke, who obviously took the brunt of the criticism after that Oregon game, that first one that Tez Johnson's talking about. He was at the combine today or yesterday, and he ran a 4.48 in the 40, ran that 2 times. And it looked like he kind of might've stumbled out of the block a little bit. I'm sure he might've wanted to do a little bit better, but that's really solid. Then today we've had Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson run the 40, which I was really surprised by. I didn't think they would do that at the combine. I thought they would wait till pro day, which Ohio State's pro day is going to be so awesome this year, guys. Like, I cannot wait for that. But Quinshawn measured in at 5'11 and a half, ran the 40 in a 4.48, which is really good. Then he had an 11-foot broad jump. Sorry, he was 221 pounds. 11-foot broad jump, which is just tremendous. Trey measured in at 5'10, 200 pounds, 4.43 40. I was expecting a smidge better from Trey. Texas Jadon Blue, I think he hit a 4.38. And he was, one of the guys we thought was going to be right with Trey, but he beat him. That sucks. Also, Travis Etienne, whichever one of those brothers, I don't know, ran a 4.43. So he tied Trey. Jordan James from Oregon ran a 4.55. The Oregon fans told me he was faster than Trey. He's not. But when we talk about 40 times, it's a different style of running. In the open field, I'm taking Trey over any of those guys to beat them in a race when they're standing up. We're talking about coming off the blocks here. I don't know why they don't change that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you could get a better measure of football speed if you don't have them coming off the blocks like that. This is not like, they're not sprinters. Anyway, nothing really surprised me yet from the combine as far as the Ohio State guys, other than Tyleik Williams, 6'3", 334. Now, when we see Ohio State list guys, we know that in many cases, not just Ohio State, but every college program, even high school program, you beef up your guys a little bit. I did not think Tyleik was really 334. And when I saw that, I was like, wow. And we all got stupid skills. Like, one of mine is telling how much people weigh. And it just comes from my background of powerlifting and bodybuilding. And like that's my hobby. And I'm just, really good at telling somebody how much they weigh. I can get within 5 pounds. I could do it at the carnival. I'm really good at it. This got me, man. This tricked me. Tyreek, an inch shorter than Michigan's Kenneth Grant, weighs more. He's just an incredibly muscular guy. If we look at Kenneth Grant, like this is a guy who is an inch taller than Tyreek. I just thought there's no way that this guy weighs less than Tyreek, but he does. So that's pretty cool for Tyreek. That means, if they want to peel 20 pounds off him, he's going to get even quicker. He is just freaky quick at that size. Ty Hamilton, 299 at 6'3", and he is, very low body fat for 299. That's incredible. It's no wonder that they call this dude the bobblehead. Speaking of bobbleheads, guys, I love bobbleheads. I've got a lot of Ohio State bobbleheads around here. So a Jack Sawyer ad for a bobblehead pops up yesterday, and it's really cool. He's doing the Scoop and Sawyer in the bobblehead. Like that's what the picture is clearly. And this thing's for sale. I'm like, it's $40 plus shipping, which is a little steep for a bobblehead. But I'm like, whatever. I want that. That'll look great in here. So I go to order it. And as I'm going through, it says, this is a pre-ship and won't ship till August. Like, wow, dude, no, that's not the way the world works anymore. I'm not waiting till August for a bobblehead. So we'll have to wait on that. But you probably have heard by now. I did a short about it, and it's kind of been everywhere. Denzel Burke coming out talking about Julian Sayin. So he comes out and says what he has to say about Julian Sayin being that guy. Emeka then doubles down the next day, wide receiver day, which was yesterday. And he agreed and then compared him to JJ, really. Said he's never seen that kind of arm talent at such a young age. When Denzel was talking, they asked him to compare his arm to somebody. And it looked to me like he was about to say CJ, but he said, nah, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to put that on him. But those of us who've been paying attention to this guy for a couple years now, obviously we've known that this dude has a freaky arm. And pretty much this is what everybody's been saying about him since coming out of high school. Not only that, but incredibly accurate. And you can see the difference when he's warming up with the rest of the Ohio quarterbacks the rest of the Ohio State quarterbacks on the field last year. Now, he's also incredibly smart. And Denzel and everybody else talk about his voice. He needs to find his voice. So far, he's been really quiet. And obviously, we know that'll get better with more confidence. He's never going to be a Will Howard guy, never going to be a Devin Brown guy when it comes to that style of leadership. But you also got to factor in not the easiest position that he came in. I mean, he came in kind of recruiting over or transferring over Aaron Nolan. That's a little uncomfortable. Then he immediately jumped over Lincoln Keenholz. That's also a little uncomfortable. And I think that that the approach will change as he grows more confidence. When we look back at CJ Stroud's first year starting, CJ Stroud was also very reserved, very quiet. And we're just now seeing CJ in the his second year starting at Ohio State, he was a little more like that. And now with the Texans, he's full on, so that comes with age. By the way, Kyle McCord was obviously, we know, and this is a lot of people's issue with McCord, very quiet, very reserved, didn't look like he was leading or having fun or just stone-faced, never got fired up. And then he goes to Syracuse, and all of a sudden, that is a big part of his personality. So definitely Julian can get better about that, and I think he will. And when we look at Tavian, he's for sure big personality leader. I think Brady Edmonds, class of 2027, quarterback who, I know, talking about 27 seems ridiculous, but I really think this guy's going to be an Ohio State quarterback. He's somewhere in the middle of those two. But Julian's going to want to be better. And as smart as he is, as good as he wants to be, everybody sings his praises about everything else. I think it's something that we are going to see him get better at as time goes. But I am so excited for spring. I'm so excited to see him play. The whole season is on him, in my opinion. Like, we went over the position group rooms. The only one we haven't done is cornerback yet. We'll get to that this week. But I think every room coming into the season outside of running back room, we can say, like, look, this is top 10 at the worst, maybe a top 5 room. Some of them are guaranteed top 5 rooms in the country. And so much of it is going to be dependent on the quarterback play. But I appreciate you guys so much for joining me. Please do subscribe to the show. If you're on Twitter, please retweet it. I think I put this on Twitter today. And if you're listening on podcast, I do need some reviews on podcast. If you could pop me a review, if you're on Apple Pods, I'd appreciate that so much. I'd love to read it on the air if you got a funny one. Now, public records requests have gone in by media members to get the data, the information from the internal investigations that the police officers conducted on their departments after the post-game fight for the game. And this stuff has just been released, and it's pretty wild, man. So the post-game, obviously, at Ohio Stadium, when Michigan comes and plants the flag in the middle of the field, a brawl starts, and police come, pepper spray gets deployed. A lot of people got a lot of strong opinions on this. So the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, and they don't know who sprayed first. Was it Michigan police or Ohio police? But we do know that both Michigan and Ohio police were both deploying pepper spray. And the Michigan Police Department was the University of Michigan Police Department that were there on the scene. So one version says it was them. The other version says it was at the same time. Regardless, another report says Franklin County and the Ohio State University Police several times deployed spray as officers were on the ground being pushed and shoved by large, highly trained and skilled athletes in full football attire. The players had the advantage on both sides with strength conditioning, protective gear, and they outnumbered the police presence, trying to suppress the growing threat. And when I hear that, like the players had the advantage on both sides, it kind of makes it sound like they were trying to fight the police. There are no allegations of them trying to fight the police, but it almost feels like, I don't know, like you're wording it like it was the police trying to quell a large riot that was about to break out, and they were coming at the police. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. They were going at each other. I understand where the police are coming from here. They're trying to break up a fight. They got a job to do. And, you certainly don't want to see anybody get hurt, especially coaches. And we did see some of the coaches fall down and some of the cops fall down. So I fully get it. I just don't know if maybe that didn't get out of hand a little bit. And I think this one here in a second here might be a little way overboard. But one officer states he used a short burst of pepper spray because he thought it would assist in gaining compliance from the aggression. And 3 department officials agreed that all this was reasonable, including the threat of a taser. So you got a guy, Lieutenant Sean Peck, and he wrote that a 300-pound lineman was trying to charge past him. Due to his size and his protective gear, I placed my taser in the small of his back where there were no pads and pushed him away from the crowd, warning him that I was going to tase him. And they determined that that was justified. I'm really glad this guy did not deploy his taser on the field at Ohio Stadium to a player in football pads. That would not have been good. They also deemed that it was justified when Deputy Thomas Bellamy punched a Michigan player who was standing over an Ohio State police officer due to the officer's back and weapon being exposed and the uncertain nature of the player's intentions. He says, I used a single hand strike with a closed fist. That's a punch to the neck area because he was wearing a helmet and shoulder pads in an effort to force him off the pile. So now we're talking about being worried about a player grabbing the officer's gun. I don't know, man. I don't know, guys. That sounds a little ridiculous, but the same officer wrote that he discharged his pepper spray, but he only did it when he was bumped. It was an accident. He didn't mean to discharge it. But the best part of this entire story is there was one arrest in the entire melee. That man was Abraham Clark. Abraham Clark is a Florida resident, but apparently an Ohio State fan. He ran onto the field and got arrested. And when asked by the police, why did you run on the field? Abraham said, to keep Michigan from planting the flag. Now, that's a guy who decided there are some things that are worth taking a butt whooping. And, I don't know. I kind of respect it. I kind of respect Abraham there because that's certainly how I was feeling on the couch watching that thing. When Khalil Mullings talked after this and he talks, you got 60 minutes to fight. And it's just a shame that they took it to this, and Texas planted their flag on our field. We didn't do anything. Like, Michigan was already in the locker room. Ohio State fans and former players were extremely mad that Ohio State did nothing in 22 when Michigan planted the flag. And some people think this is a ridiculous reason to fight. And I just, the people that don't understand that think they should have looked the other way. I think they're folks that just, I don't know, don't understand what a 22-year-old dude is like when they're being disrespected. Like, that is the utmost form of disrespect, and it is intended to be the utmost form of disrespect. Michigan wanted to provoke them. Ohio State responded in the way that they did because Michigan provoked them. If they hadn't, they would have been roasted mercilessly. You're in a lose-lose situation, right? You do it, you get in trouble. You don't do it, you look like a sissy. I fully support what they did. They defended the stadium. It was a beautiful thing to me. And I would feel the same way had Ohio State tried to plant the flag at Michigan, and Michigan the same way. I've always been consistent about this. I never liked James Franklin, and I came on here after the USC Penn State game and said right on here that I have a newfound respect for James Franklin, as there was a clip of Penn State players trying to plant the flag at USC when they beat them earlier this year. And James Franklin came over to his players and ripped the flag out of their hands and said, "No, you're not doing that." James Franklin understands how disrespectful that is and what that means to the other team and what that's going to lead to. So I get it. Some people aren't wired that way, and that's great. It's not really a good way to be wired, but there are codes some men live by. And there are certain things like, if you break the code, you expect to fight. That's just what it is. Like, I'm 45 years old now, but I was once a young man and lived by a lot of these codes. I've lived in places where if you reach over someone's lunch tray, that's a fight. Like, if you touch their foot with a broom, we're fighting. Like, there are just codes. That's certainly one of them. Michigan overstepped the bounds. And the thing about this fight is it is now going down into, like, we're going to see this every year, every hype video. What do they show now? They show Boston and Charles Woodson fighting on every hype video. Like, that fight, we will see for the rest of our lives before the game is played. But about Michigan, Sherrod Moore came out and talked this week, and he was talking about the Big Ten. And he said the Big Ten is the best conference, with us winning the national championship in 23, Ohio winning in 24. I'm going to keep pretending like that doesn't bother me, man. It just irritates the crap out of me. Ohio, that is, really does. But the Big Ten getting much tougher and much more difficult for the Buckeyes. Expansion obviously made it a lot more difficult when you add in teams, but Ohio State is not trying to run the old Big Ten. This is so much different now, from the days of the Big Two and the Little Eight. And the Big Ten moving forward is certainly a new challenge. But what's so different? Like, it's much more than the obvious, and that is bringing in Oregon, USC, Washington, and UCLA. Oregon recruiting in the top 5 every year moving forward, consistently getting the most impressive transfer portal classes, and they aren't going anywhere. They weren't as talented as Ohio State this year, but the day will come where that's an even-Steven talent game, and it's going to come pretty quick. USC, after Lincoln just finished his 3rd year there, his first cycle, he really made some errors, I think, in recruiting. He started off with 12 California kids in his first class. Then he dropped down to 7, then just 5 California kids in his last class out of a class of 24. So they bring in Notre Dame's general manager, steal him away. All of a sudden, USC has the number 2 class in the country, and it has 7 California kids in that class already out of just 11. So they're focusing at home, and it's going to pay serious dividends. So Oregon and USC, number 1 and number 2 class of 2026. USC may not have gotten it right this year, but what they are is a team that's going to keep on swinging and do whatever it takes, because they're a do whatever it takes program. Then you got Washington. Washington has been sitting here watching Oregon get fat. They just got a taste of what it was to go to the national championship in 2023. They lose Kalen DeBoer, and they go get Jed Fish, who did a fantastic job at Arizona. I think he did a great job year 1 at Washington and is only going to keep it getting better. So you got those 3 programs now also joining the Big Ten as we move forward that are going to be in the way. But now we got a new Michigan, and this is a total different Michigan than we've had, right? So it wasn't just, I don't know how much everybody's paying attention to the recruiting. Obviously, everybody knows about the big money for the Bryce Underwood flip, but it was so much more than that. It wasn't just Bryce Underwood. They flipped Shamari Earls, who was at one point a 5-star cornerback. He was committed to Georgia. They flipped Nate Marshall, a top 100 edge, who Auburn had flipped from them with a big bag. They flipped him back. 5-star lineman, Ty Haywood. They got a real receiver in Andrew Marsh, a guy that Heartline was after. They got Owosu Batang, a linebacker that James Laurinaitis was after. So 2 5-star tackles, 2 other linemen in Caden Strayhorn and Avery Gotch that Ohio State was after, and obviously the one final screw you with Chase Herbstreit. But they invested a ton of money in that class of 2025, and everybody was wondering, okay, is this a one-year thing? What are they going to do in 26? What's this going to look like? They are coming at this in 26 again in the same way. The money is really there, and they're spending aggressively. They're looking like Oregon on the recruiting trail. So many guys that Ohio State and Oregon and Bama and Georgia and Texas are in on. Michigan didn't used to be a team that recruited like that. You would see Ohio State cross recruit with Michigan not very often. More often than not, it was Georgia and Alabama in that mix they were going up against. Michigan had a few pockets nationally where they would, pop in and try to get guys, but they weren't just saying, okay, we're going after the top 5 in every position. And this is a totally different animal now. And I suspect it will continue as they continue to raise this money. It's a lot different. It's a lot different up there. So in the Big Ten, instead of just Ohio State, sometimes Michigan, sometimes Penn State popping up there at the top, we've now got Ohio State, a different Michigan with different talent, USC, Oregon. Those are all do whatever it takes programs. And then we got Penn State, who I don't think is quite at that level of commitment, but they're about as close as you can be without being there. If they were a do whatever it takes program, we'd have seen them. There was wide receivers out there. There was really good wide receivers out there in the portal. We'd have seen them do whatever it takes to go bring one of them in. They didn't. But all the rest of those 4 teams, they're there. And those 5 teams right now, obviously, represent the top of the Big Ten. So now we're fighting with all of them. And what this feels like to me is the SEC from 2006 to 2020 with Georgia, Bama, LSU, and Auburn and Florida, and the rotating chair of who that next team was going to be. It just feels so much like that. It feels so much more competitive. And when we talk about potentially these automatic qualifiers, with the top 4 teams in the Big Ten getting the automatic qualifiers, if you go back the last 10 years, you've got teams like Purdue and Minnesota and Iowa making runs to get in that playoff. Now, the college football playoff was a million miles away from those caliber of programs just last year, right? And all of a sudden, this now looks like something in their grasp. Conference is at 18 teams now, and that means big disparities in schedules. And we've seen it as we've gone over these schedules. One team will have a really tough one, and you can find a couple of teams in the Big Ten that, like Rutgers last year, who didn't play Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, or USC. And in a year when you get a schedule like that, if you've got some talent, you've got a good coach, you've got a veteran team, even if you're a subpar Big Ten team, you got a chance to get in that top 4 and a chance to actually make the playoffs. What is that going to change about these teams? As this comes at the exact same time as revenue sharing, I think that it persuades them to now spend. Remember that $20.5 million is a salary cap. It's not required. You don't have to spend that. So these teams in these programs that were formerly had no chance at making the playoffs, they're now deciding how much of this money are we going to invest? The playoff is actually attainable every once in a while for us now. How much are we going to invest of this money? Are we going to plan it every 4th year? We're going to go all the way in. Like, what are they going to do? And when we go over these programs, I think there's some interesting programs here that we are going to see maybe elevate their floor quite a bit. So we've got the Big Five, and let's just kind of go by recruiting ranking with the rest of the Big Ten. What do we think about them? Are they headed up? Are they going to invest the money? Are they going to make the Big Ten even tougher? We'll start with Nebraska, who had the 22nd ranked class. They got a coach who I can't stand anymore, but he's got a plan. He's got a vision. They've got a brand new facility that makes the Woody Hayes Athletic Center look like your old high school field house by comparison. They've got one of the best fan bases in the country, one of the most dedicated fan bases in the country. They're active in the portal, doing very well in it, and they will continue to get better. They will go all in on this money. In Nebraska, if they go 8-3 next year, do they become a do whatever it takes program again? Remember, this is a blue blood program, and there's just 8 of them in the country. Yes, their down period has been longer than anybody else's, 20 years, maybe longer. And that's because they couldn't recruit. They couldn't recruit in Nebraska. Things changed for them. I don't know that there is a program out there where NIL has benefited more. Like Nebraska can now get kids to come. They've got a pile of 4-stars coming back to Nebraska. And that's something they haven't had. Now they're able to go in the portal and supplement from that as well. So is the arrow pointing up at Nebraska? Absolutely. Nebraska could potentially enter into the fray with the big boys every couple of years. With the 23rd class in the country last year, you got Washington. Obviously, we've talked about him. I think Jedd Fisch is a really good coach. How much are they going to support him? How much money are they going to put into that kitty? Well, I think they have a realistic shot at making the playoffs pretty often. And when we look at Michigan and what happened there, when they got one big-time investor involved, how much money is in Seattle? There's a ton of money there. There's a ton of billionaires there. A ton of them with, not a ton, being a little ridiculous here, not a ton, but there are several with ties to Washington. It just takes one. It just takes one to get involved, and all of a sudden, Washington could potentially be a monster. Maryland is particularly interesting. Maryland, with the 25 ranked class in the country. Maryland's located in one of the most talent-rich areas of the country, and the DMV just pumps out dudes. They've already showed us that they can get the commitment of the number 1 edge rusher, Zion Ellie, in this class right here. Cost them a lot of money. They're now going after the number 2 offensive tackle in the country, Manny Ahianachu, also a hometown boy like Zion Ellie. And he said his eyes are open to Maryland now that Ellie has signed. What if they get those 2 5-star, number 1 and number 2 guys? All of a sudden, the DMV and the players from that area are seeing the momentum. Maryland's spending money. Things could really change at Maryland. Not only does that ding Ohio State recruiting, Penn State's really hard because that's one of their big areas, but this could potentially be a team who says, look, we want to make a run at this playoff. And let's remember, the proposal for the 4 automatic qualifiers is out there, but there's also the proposal that we just might end up with where instead of the conference championship, 1 plays 2 for the conference championship, and then 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5 to advance to the playoffs. And in that scenario, all you've got to do to have a shot at a playoff game is be in the top 6 of the standings. That's worth it. That is worth it for a place like Maryland that can get talent to spend that money now. At number 27 in the country, this one I'm really confused by, Wisconsin. I don't know the level of support they're giving Luke Fickell. I just don't know. They had 23 kids head out in the portal. They brought in 18. He was inside the top 25 in his first class and then outside in his second, so goes backwards. He gets an extension after another 5-7 season. I don't know about that, but he's entering a season with the hardest schedule in the Big Ten, one of the hardest in the country. I suspect it'll be a not very, not much better record-wise. I hope to see them play better. But how does it affect recruiting if they don't get that record better? I'd be pretty concerned if I was a Wisconsin fan. Wisconsin, for the longest time, was, the number 3 or 4 team in the Big Ten. Now they're sub 500. This was a team that won the most games in the country over the 10-year period that we had the 4-team playoff without making the playoffs. Now that's a stat often attributed to Penn State. It was not. It was Wisconsin who won the most games during that 10-year period. And that's kind of been forgotten quick. Can Fickle get this back up? He can't without the support, and I don't know what's there. Is there arrow pointing up? I want to believe in him because he's a Buckeye, but it feels right now like it's pretty level to me. The number 33 class in the country, this is one that could make a big move here if they decide they want to spend some money. What do we talk about with Ohio State recruiting? All the time. I feel like it comes up every other week. New Jersey talent, Jalen McClain, IGB, Tywan Malone, Deshaun Stewart, Des Jones, Isaiah West, Maxwell Roy, Jaden Bonsu, who's transferred out, and he's got Cody Simon. They got a ton of talent in New Jersey is the point. The New Jersey State School is Rutgers. What if Rutgers starts spending max money at $20.5 million? Do they start getting a couple of those guys like Maryland to stay home, a couple of the big dogs? Can they get some momentum with that? If they can have a really tough roster. Iowa, look, I don't know what's going on with Iowa other than Kirk Ferentz. I don't know if he's even going to want to spend that money. He just does things his own way, and it's worked for him. I've been a fan of him since he was with the Cleveland Browns. But if I was an Iowa fan, I'd be ready to go into the next chapter of Iowa football. Like, it's been about 4 years now where it's just seemed to appear like he is kind of getting into that situation of the old king of a program, the guy that sticks around well past his prime, does whatever he wants, doesn't change with the times. It's looking and starting to feel like it's going down a Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden type of situation at Iowa. And for me, the arrow is level, and it might be pointing down. Number 45, Illinois. Guys, Illinois, a fantastic season last year. 2 years ago, a really good season. Number 3 in returning production. They currently have a top 10 class in the country, which means nothing right now, but it does mean they got Vic Singleton, a 4-star corner out of Ohio, who Ohio State wanted, Michigan wanted, Alabama, Georgia. This is a top recruit, and they got him signed right now. They got him committed right now. Then they got Cam Thomas, a 4-star linebacker out of Ohio. They've already been doing pretty well for themselves in the portal. They got a ton of their seniors to come back, like Ohio State, like Penn State, like Michigan. Following that blueprint, let's invest in our own guys. They've got a great schedule. It looks like they're really strong candidates to make the playoffs this year. And they've got a really good coach, a veteran coach. They've got a new facility, just 5 years old. And they're definitely going to be investing money in football. We're already seeing that. When the rev share comes, Illinois will continue to do it. The stock is way up with Illinois. How about Indiana? Obviously, we know the stock is way up in Indiana with Kurt Signetti, his long contract. Got just the 47th class last year, but I attribute a lot of that to, recruits and young people are going to need to see this a couple years before they totally buy into what's happening in Indiana. But they're working the portal well again. Obviously, they get Mendoza out of Cal, one of the best quarterbacks to come in and lead them this upcoming year. UCLA, the number 46 recruiting class. I don't think they're going, it's whatever to me. I don't think they're investing. I don't think they're going anywhere. They're just UCLA. And I feel the same way about Minnesota. Minnesota, PJ Fleck's done a really good job. I feel like they could potentially get a lot better. I just don't feel like they're going to be investing in football the way a lot of these other programs are. Michigan State, I think, will. They're usually complaining that they don't have a lot of money, but Jonathan Smith is a hell of a coach. I think they're lucky to have him. They've got a really good quarterback in Aiden Childs. They've got a great wide receiver in Nick Marsh. They've got an opportunity here, and I think we're going to see them invest pretty well. Their stock is pointing up. And finally, we get to Northwestern and Purdue. Now, Northwestern, we got a brand new facility. We got a brand new stadium being built. Do we think there's any way that they build those and don't want to invest in the football program? I think they definitely are. So I think the stock is up on them. The arrow's up on them. And then Purdue, just the opposite. I think Purdue's in huge trouble. They're not even worth talking about it, which you think back to the Drew Brees and Joe Tiller days, just, it's kind of sad. But as we look at the Big Ten with all these teams, guys, Nebraska, Illinois, Indiana, Washington, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan State, all arrows pointing way up with revenue sharing and the playoff being expanded. Plus, we've got the Big Five in Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, SC, and Penn State. The Big Ten is so different than it was 5 years ago that it is just, it's not the same thing at all. So much harder to get one of those coveted 4 spots if that's the direction we go. And I kind of love it. I got to admit, I kind of love it. Anyway, let's get a couple of your comments in here and wrap with you guys for a few. We got our girl, Doreen. Juck, keep going, my guy. Go Bucks. Thank you, Doreen. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being a member of the Juck on Bucks YouTube channel, which you guys are the best. We do, matter of fact, you guys are owed a video on that. Shout out Abraham. That's right. Abraham. Shout out Abraham. If anybody can find Abraham, the single arrest after the melee on the field, I would absolutely, I'd absolutely love to talk to Abraham. We could get him on the show. We could talk. Don't tase me, bro. Hey, Mika says, Juck, have you seen my show? Mika, I have not seen your show. Tell everybody what your show is so I can let them know. My man, Dave. Classless organization and delusional fan base. We know who we're talking about. Dave, I was just talking about you on yesterday's show. I was telling everybody, I was like, I got this issue when I'm not feeling creative. I need a co-host, somebody to bounce something off of so I can just roll like that. And I said, I got this buddy. We go back from, since we were in our teens, who calls in on the Mark Rogers show. And he's just got the most interesting personality and delivery. I don't know how everybody feel about him, but I think, with our chemistry and as far as we go back, could have a pretty interesting segment. I think we should try that, Dave. I think we should try that. Oh, there we go. Look, there, Dave says, Steely, I was on Mark Rogers this week. The in-state talent has picked up tremendously the last few years. The class of 2026, an excellent class. The unfortunate thing is, it's a lot different recruiting in-state than it has been. In fact, I just had a long conversation with an Ohio prospect's parent yesterday. And, things are so different than they used to be. And not just different, but these out-of-state schools that are now invading Ohio, which if anybody hasn't seen this graphic, On3 pumped out a graphic of obviously the most talented states in the country for this current class of 2026. Who's pumping out the most talent? Well, let's go top 300 players. And when we talk about population by state, Ohio, I believe, is the 7th or 8th most populous state in the country. And when we look at the graphic of who's pumping out the most high-level talent, you got huge states in Florida and Texas. Georgia, not as big as them population-wise, but pumping out a tremendous amount of talent now. Then you've got California, and they used to be quite a bit higher, huge population, just 20 top 300 players. Then you got North Carolina and Ohio, who are about the same in population, but way outperforming how many people they have in the state. And if you continue down, Ohio, the only northern state on there, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Virginia, Louisiana, there's not one single northern state except for Ohio. And the most interesting thing here is, if I am a general manager of Oregon or Alabama, where do I want to go to recruit? I want to go to places that are heavy with, a lot of talent, condensed talent, in places where we know that the hometown school, even though they're an excellent destination, they're not paying guys out of high school as much as everybody else. And if I'm a place that wants to pay a lot of money out of high school, that has the okay to do that from, the powers to be at my university, that's a hell of a place to target, right? It sure is. And that's why, it's getting more difficult. Not just that, but the world has shrunk. These younger guys have grown up way more exposed to all these other programs than people my age did. It's just, not only that, but when you're away from home, it's so much easier to stay connected with your family through all the technology we have. So things are much different, way more different than keeping kids in state like it used to be. Like, it's just so much more difficult. And when I look at the class of 2026, we got to do better than we did in 25. I don't know that we will. I really don't. The Wisconsin schedule is insane. Wisconsin's schedule is insane. Everybody talking about Florida's. I don't know, man. Wisconsin, for the caliber of program Wisconsin is, like, I think their schedule, is absolutely as difficult. Lisa says, do you think Nebraska is going to be serious about making a possible playoff run? I don't think this year, Lisa, but I think if we look at Raiola in year 3 with the pieces they're trying to build around him, they've got one shot with a kid of that caliber. They got one shot. If they can parlay Raiola into a playoff berth, then they can get that next Raiola. Then it looks like, okay, I can go to Nebraska. I can make the playoffs. I can be a star player and get paid and be absolutely beloved. You look at the videos when David Sanders, Ohio State's big-time offensive line recruit that signed at Tennessee, when Nebraska got in the fold for that, it surprised the heck out of a lot of people. And I thought it was a beautiful strategy by them. And they were like, look, we're getting Dylan Raiola. If we can get this guy, like, this changes everything in recruiting. So we need to go all in financially. It was a great strategy. They didn't get him. But what they did do is when they brought him out there, they had Dylan Raiola come pick him up from the airport. And when they pulled up to the stadium, Dylan Raiola had sent out a message. He wants all the Nebraska fans to be there. And I don't know what this would look like anywhere that you did this, but it would not look like it looked like at Nebraska. There were 100 fans in 20 minutes standing outside the facility to cheer as they got out of the car and make him feel welcome. This is different. And I feel like what we're feeling here is a different momentum in Nebraska. Sorry, guys, I just got popped out of here. Anyway, I think it's different for sure. Andre says, parlay ravioli at Nebraska. North Carolina has really come up over the years. Could be big for old Bill B. North Carolina talent has definitely come up a ton. The good news is it's a real honey hole for us. And Belichick, and they're doing things so odd. I think that Lombardi is Lombardi is the GM that he brought with him. For those that don't know, Belichick brings in Lombardi with him and getting paid $1.5 million a year to be the GM. He's basically handling all the recruiting and the money that they're going to spend. And he's got this pie in the sky idea of how this is supposed to operate. I've read all his plans about how he intends to pay these guys in NIL to make sure there's no animosity between players and it's merit based. And he's just clueless as to what's going on in college football. Like, all this makes sense if there's rules that are being enforced. There's not. So what do you do if you're trying to do this merit-based pay scale? Okay, this guy, yeah, he hasn't done a whole lot yet, but everybody knows his pedigree, and they're coming in trying to offer him this, trying to offer him that. You want to give him a $10,000 raise? You're just going to let him walk. Like, there's so many things where I look through and I'm reading his philosophy and how he's planning on handling this, and thinks he's brilliant, by the way. Thinks he's just outsmarting all these college people. And I'm just laughing at this guy. Like, yeah, this is not how this is going to work for you, pal. But I do think it's going to be incredibly interesting, guys. And this, Richie, I was just about to bring up. Richie brings up that Belichick and North Carolina are doing Hard Knocks, which, oh yeah, buddy. I cannot wait for that, to see him coaching college kids after listening to him coach these Patriots guys for all these years. How's it going to be with college kids who can enter the transfer portal twice a year? Does he try to tone that down? I don't know. It's going to be pretty funny. It's going to be pretty funny. Colton, what's up, buddy? Yeah, we only got 6 months left for the season. It's crazy, man. The off season's so long. Anyway, guys. Well, I appreciate you so much, guys. It is time for me to go get some chores done and run to the grocery store for my sweet, lovely lady. And I hope you all have a fantastic Saturday. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are listening on podcast, please give me a review. I got to get a couple of those up so that that gets pumped out to some more people, as it's grown a ton in audio only versions. And I'm trying to pay attention to you guys, and when I'm running like clips and video clips, to make sure I'm doing it when I'm talking and things of that nature. So I appreciate you guys so much, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship. Something stupid is coming out of his mouth. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name. Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck. What are you doing? The season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football. This guy is a bonehead. They love him. I question your judgment as an adult. I really do. I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it. Get us back our sleeves and say, bring me that. That's the one I want.